you want to get started decorating cakes, but you're not sure what supplies you're going to need up front, or you're worried that you're going to have to spend a lot of money buying cake decorating supplies, I want you to know that there really is a way to do this without spending a ton of money on supplies. I'm Kara Jane with ICING for Buttercream, and today I want to share with you my favorite inexpensive cake decorating supplies. So let's get started.
Now, these supplies and tools are in no particular order, so let's just start with the piping bags. Of course, you can get lots of different brands of piping bags. I haven't really found that really matters. Others may disagree with me, but I do like to get the disposable bags instead of getting the reusable bags because I do not like to clean out my icing bags. And I also like to get the 12-inch bags because they're fairly large. You can put a lot more icing in them, and then you can use them for small projects or larger projects. Next is icing tips, and you can go down a rabbit hole with icing tips. You can just build a huge collection if you want to. They're really inexpensive, but if you're just starting out, I would suggest these two. These two are the icing tips that I use the most. It's the 2D tip from Wilton and the 1M tip from Wilton as well. And these are fairly large tips, but I really like to use them for rosettes and piping cupcakes and then rosettes on your cakes. You can also do fairly large borders, like shell borders like this cake has, around the bottom of your cakes. Okay, the next supply I have for you is gel food coloring. So when you are decorating cakes and you are having to add color to your buttercream or even your cake batter, you don't want to use the liquid food coloring that you can find on your baking aisle in your grocery store. That is going to add too much liquid. It's going to change the consistency of your buttercream or your cake batter. The gel food coloring is really kind of a thick, well, it's a gel consistency, so you do want to use it. It's more concentrated. You don't have to use as much. They come in little tiny jars. You can just use a toothpick to get them out of the jars and add them to your buttercream or your cake batter. And it really just does a much better job than the liquid food coloring. Alright, the next tool is icing spatulas, and I use two different sizes, a larger one and then the smaller one. For the larger one, I can cover a lot more area on my cake, so when I'm adding the crumb coat and the base coat of the buttercream, I'll use the large spatula. But for filling the layers or the buttercream between the layers of the cakes, I'll use the small one. And the small one is also handy when you're doing things like making texture in your buttercream, horizontal lines or vertical lines. You can see in this cake here, I just spun my turntable, which we'll talk about later, and held the smaller spatula against it as I turned it, and it just sort of makes a neat texture on it. And I'll also put some links in the blog post. There's going to be a link to the blog post in the description below, but it will have links to my favorite tools and where you can grab those for yourself. The next tool is buttercream smoothers, and you can go crazy getting all kinds of different buttercream smoothers, but my favorite is the metal smoother and the plastic smoother. The only thing with the plastic one is you have to be careful not to hold it too firmly on your cake because it kind of can bend. The metal smoother obviously doesn't bend on you. But I really like my plastic smoother. It just seems to be able to smooth cakes better for me. I'm not really sure why, but everybody has their own preferences. And then the metal smoother can be heated up with some really hot water and smooth it around your buttercream to get it really smooth. But these are very inexpensive things to buy, and you can even get a couple of different kinds just to see what you like the best. And here you can see two cakes that I've done. And of course you use them to smooth the sides of your cake and the top of your cake. You can do neat things like the watercolor effect on the cake on the right. The next tool is a turntable, and you can get really expensive turntables if you wanted to, but if you're just starting out and you want something on the cheaper end, you can just get the Wilton turntable. It's the one pictured at the top, and I have this one. This is what I started out with, and I actually still use it on occasion, as well as the turntable on the bottom, and that's either in a Tico or a Winco. I can't remember which, but those are both good brands too. They're They're heavy duty. They're much more heavy than the plastic Wilton one, but the Wilton one works great too. It does turn pretty smoothly. So if you want to start out with that, that's a very inexpensive way to start out. All right, the next tool is a cake leveler. And you can also get expensive cake levelers as well, but I don't suggest doing that up front. This one is just the plain Wilton leveler, and now Wilton has two different ones, one with this sort of wire on it that's pictured, and one with a serrated kind of knife blade. I found that the serrated one, it sort of bows up and down when you're trying to level your cake, so I really didn't like that one as well as this one with the wire. The only thing about the wire one is if you have a cake layer that is larger than, I think, about 10 inches or so, this is going to be too small for that. But if you've got a cake that's larger, you just need to get yourself a large knife, and you can also do it that way. You can sort of put toothpicks around the cake layer to sort of guide you as you're cutting it if you're feeling a little bit unsure of that. But this one is really good. It's fairly cheap, really inexpensive to get when you're first starting out. Okay, the next tool is the mini level, and this one may seem a little bit odd to you that I would add this in caking tools, but it's actually one of my most important caking tools, and they're not expensive to get. So what I like to use this for is I will add my cake layers to a cake board the same size as the cake layers, and then I will add another cake board on top of that, and I will put the level on top just to make sure that the cake layers are all level. So especially if you are stacking cakes, you do want your cake tiers to be level. I will then fill in between the cake board. So you have your cake board, your cake layers, and then another cake board. And then I will just spread buttercream between those, smooth it out, and then set the level on top just to make sure it's still level, and I'll even set it between the cake boards. And if you're interested in seeing that process in detail, I do have a course on beginner buttercream decorating, so I'll also put a link to that in the description below so you can check that out. But it's just an easy way, sort of a cheater method that I use with this level on the top of the cake and for the sides, just to get your buttercream completely smooth and that your cake isn't leaning one direction or the other. Alright, the next supply is non-stick liner. This may also seem a little odd to you, but I promise it really does make a huge difference. And this is just sort of shelf liner. It's that rubbery textured shelf liner that you can get at the dollar store or your local grocery store. But I like to cut out a little circle of this and put it under my cake board or my cardboard cake round when I'm decorating cakes. It keeps things from sliding around on you. And in addition to this, I also like to put a layer of this in my car when I'm taking boxed up cupcakes or a cake that's been boxed and stuff. If you put this underneath it, it keeps it from sliding around on you when you're traveling with your cakes and your cupcakes. Alright, the next supply is cake boards and bases, and these are very inexpensive as well. And I have two different types of cake boards pictured here. One is the cardboard cake round. You're going to need that because one will go directly underneath your cake. And then you can also add, you can get larger cake boards and tape them together, cover them with some fancy foil, and use that as a cake base. But what I also like to do is use the foam board cake bases. You can get them in 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch thickness, and that's just whatever your preference is or how heavy your cake project is that you're going to be working on. And I like those because they're very, very firm, and they're lightweight, but they're extremely firm and sturdy, so you can put a heavy cake on them and they're going to be able to withstand the weight of that. I will also put a link to a blog post that I wrote about cake boards and bases, how to decorate them, the different sizes you can use, but it's completely all about cake boards, so don't forget to grab that. Alright, the next item is candy melts, and I just like the Wilton white candy melts, and this seems weird, I'm sure, but just hear me out. The candy melts are great for sticking items onto your cake, especially if you're working with fondant. But if you're just starting out and you're not even messing with fondant, you're just going with straight buttercream, that's okay too, because I like these for cake boards. So what I do is on the larger cake base, I will put a little bit of candy melts in the middle, and then I will set my cake board, the one that the actual cake layers are going to go on, I will set it on that, let it harden up, and that's going to keep it from moving around. Some people use buttercream to do that, but here in Texas it gets a little warm and the buttercream never really sets up quite as firm as I would like it to keep the cake from moving around on me while I'm decorating it. So the candy melts really help everything stay stable. And I'll also put a little dab of candy melts in the middle of that cake board round that I'm going to be setting my cake layers on, just a little bit in the middle instead of the buttercream, because that keeps your cake layers from moving around on you when you're trying to decorate it. And finally, you're going to need good cake and buttercream recipes, and I've got you covered on that, so don't forget to look in the description below. I've got a couple of my favorite cake recipes and a couple of my favorite buttercream recipes for you to check out. And if you like this video, I'd love for you to give it a thumbs up and to subscribe so you don't miss any new tutorials or videos. Okay, see you next time.